Imagine you meet your husband in a posh hotel in Dubai, you're married in Florida, run a successful property and development business, you live the high life with nice cars, holiday homes abroad, and you want for nothing until the recession hits. The company collapses and you are awoken from a dream with the nightmare of being told by your husband that all the money has gone. You are bankrupt. Well, Jane and Paul Carroll of Neo Financial Solutions join me now. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, let's go back to the romantic bit first of all, and how you met across a crowded room in Dubai. And maybe you tell us, Jane, about what happened.
Well, I was on holiday with my mother. Her husband was working on a ship out there, and it was over Christmas. And she just said, do you fancy just going for a few days? So that was just why we went. And on the last night, we were sat in the hotel reception, and a man sent a drink over, and it was Paul.
It was Paul. Now, what were you doing in Dubai, Paul, at the time?
Well, I was actually meant to be on holidays with my children, and the holiday got cancelled at short notice, and so I had already booked, so I decided, I'm just going to go myself. So I was effectively there for 3 or 4 days, and enjoying the sunshine, playing a bit of golf, and I just saw the two ladies, and I was leaving about 2 or 3 days afterwards, and I just thought, well, this, like mother, like daughter. I thought, well, the daughter looks good and the mother looks good, so it might be worth the investment.
Oh dear.
So, and I haven't looked back since.
Both were on a second time round, is it?
Yes, absolutely,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so it blossomed from there, and you got married in quite a casual way.
Very casual.
What happened?
Very casual. Well, we were actually on holiday, and we'd brought my mother away to say thank you because she'd been looking after the children for me at times. And Paul came off, he'd been playing golf, came off the golf course. I was just in shorts and T-shirt, and he said, do you want to just go down to the courthouse and we'll see if we can get a licence to get married? Went down to the courthouse, and he said, how much is it? $90. Okay, how much is it to actually get married? 130. So he turned around to me and said, do you want to do it? Okay.
You got married then and
that
there?
Was it.
There and there.
There and
well,
then.
We
no
had
one there, just us.
Because it was our second time around, we decided that we didn't want, well, I particularly didn't want any fuss, no messing around. We were going to do it alone, quiet, and the opportunity just arose, and we just took it, and that was it.
Were you there in your flip-flops?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, so
the wedding photographs don't exist, thank God.
Now, you obviously had a thriving business at
Yes.
this point. What sort of business were you doing?
I was involved in development of property. I was buying sites and either getting planning permission and moving them on, or else the final property that we got involved with, we bought the site, developed, got the planning permission, and we ended up developing it. So we were in that kind of business, and our main interest was in the UK and mainly in Belfast. In fact, that's where the big problem came.
How deep a hole were you in with the banks? I mean, you didn't know it was a hole at the time. You just thought it was a regular commercial transaction that you had borrowed money, you'd build, develop, sell on, make a profit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we like the reality for us was that when the crash came, and I actually saw that we had great difficulties. I had a few investors on board. I told them in 2008, maybe we need to sell. I organised a buyer for the property portfolio, but they unfortunately wouldn't let me sell. So we ended up we developing a big site in Belfast. All our personal money was in it, which was a significant amount of money. And when the banks shut down, not only did they shut my funding down, but obviously if I had have completed the project, then there was no funding for people to buy the units, even though they had committed to buying them.
So it would have been a white elephant.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Now, you threw everything at this, trying to rescue the situation.
Yeah, well, what we did was, because the banks put us under such significant pressure in 2008-9, all of our personal assets were gathered around in order to provide security to get an additional piece of funding to move a little bit further. And
so savings, everything,
family homes, our own home.
But you remortgaged things to get more funding.
In fact, what actually happened was, to continue the funding that was already in place, they insisted that they would just put their arms around everything that we owned.
So your personal guarantee extended to everything you owned?
Everything. Yeah, nothing was left untouched.
So when did you realise that this is not capable of salvation, that
I
this is
suppose-
going to go to the wall.
Yeah, I realised in probably late 2009, early 2010, and that's when I had to sit down with Jane. We were in England at the time, and I remember sitting down with her in a local pub that we used to go to, and sat down and said, look, here's what's going to happen here. We're looking at 6
Had you
months.
any clue? I mean, you knew there was pressure on because the world knew that the banks were closing down and shutting down, but you were still driving your nice cars and having a
Yeah.
nice life.
Yes, absolutely. And Paul was stressed, but I always thought we'd just get through it. I knew that the things in the Southern Ireland were going badly, but I thought because we were in Northern Ireland, it wasn't that bad. And
So that conversation in the pub, what was your reaction when he said, listen, there's nothing there?
I can't even explain what I felt like. And when somebody tells you that everything is gone, it's like you're kicked in the stomach, because it's not as bad as being told you're ill, but it's just my whole life was going to change. I didn't realise the actual repercussions of what was going to come at the time. To be honest, I wanted to punch Paul in the face at the time. But
For telling you or for not telling you soon enough?
yes, for not telling me soon enough. But I think men do that. I think that men sometimes keep things to themselves to try and protect the family in a way. And I think that's what he was doing. He was trying to protect us. And I didn't want to come across as a nag and keep saying to him, what's wrong? Is there something that you need to tell me? Because men don't. Men go into their little caves and they don't really tell you everything.
So after the anger subsided and the repercussions started to set in, what did you start to lose? I mean, what had to go first? What had to go second? And eventually everything went in. Like, what was the first thing to go, Paul?
Well, I suppose what we really had to do, first of all, it's kind of, you could see it coming, and definitely I think that if I was more clever about it, maybe we could have avoided some of the situations. But I fell into the trap that we speak to people every day about. If it's going to go, you need to pull the plug sooner rather than later, because you end up being worse off. And so from our perspective, well, the first thing was, Jane had to go out and get a job because she hadn't been working at the time. She was working with me, so she had to physically go write the CV, get that sorted out. All of the car business, we had a couple of cars. The cars had to go.
Holiday
home gone. No, the kids. We had to probably one of the worst things I felt we had to do was the kids. The three of them were in college at the time. We had to call them in and say, listen, you know those college fees we pay, you know the rent we pay every week, and all of that kind of stuff, and all of that's gone. You're going to have to go and get a job. And if you want to continue in college, well, you're going to have to get a job.
Yeah.
Now, the amazing thing about that is, and again, it's something I say to people all the time, their reaction was just fantastic because they just got on with it. Our 15-year-old daughter, she's the only one who has a bit of a problem because she says to us all the time, Victoria says, oh, Dad, why couldn't you be rich now rather than when I was 10? Because I want all the designer stuff now, you know. But the others were just brilliant. They just got on with it.
They were very supportive.
Yeah, and from a point of view of fessing up, it's all the deed of the thought process, and what the expectation is always way worse than what you.
At this stage, presumably all the creditors, people you owe money to, banks and financial institutions, the car leasing people and so on, the letters are coming in.
Absolutely.
And you're not able to meet any bills. I mean, how stressful was that?
It's extremely stressful, as I say. So, well, actually, and just going a bit further, when we went bankrupt, I went bankrupt. And one of the things that one of the most powerful things was that when you went bankrupt, from the day you went bankrupt, there was that dread of the postman was gone.
Yeah.
Because you could ignore if they shouldn't be sending you the stuff at that point.
Exactly.
And if they do, you just ignore it.
And as I say to some of our clients now, I say that certificate you get from the bankruptcy court to say that you are bankrupt is like money, because anyone rings you up looking for money, you send them a copy of that and they never ring you again. So, and in terms of that was very, but the stress leading up to that, the constant calls, the people, because there was creditors that we left, and there were people that had invested in our projects that were going to lose money, and they did lose money, like ourselves. And so dealing with that, we had some friends that were very, very close friends, and over a long period of time that unfortunately those friendships broke down. That probably was the worst thing that happened, you know.
You then went bankrupt and you've nothing, and you have to get out there and put bread on the table because you were the one with the job. But being bankrupt through the UK jurisdiction means it's not a life sentence.
No,
it's a year.
Yeah, it's a year.
So what have you done? You've restarted, but a different kind of business. You're not developing anymore.
Yeah, no, effectively, when we went through the bankruptcy process, we found that there was nobody here in this country who could help us in terms of personal issues and bankruptcy. If you're corporate, you can go to various people and they help you with corporate stuff, but there was no help, and so in that process, I then had to investigate all of my options and our options in terms of bankruptcy or insolvency, whatever it was.
Now you're trained as accountants and financial expertise.
Yeah, we were qualified accountants. So I had to go through all that process myself and investigate it, and I eventually got myself out through the other end. And one or two colleagues who had been in similar positions asked me to then help with that. And out of that process, then we decided that we were going to start this business,
which you have done, Neo Financial Solutions. And what you can offer in addition to expertise is, we've been there. We've done that.
Well, that's why I wanted to come on here today to say to people, we have been those people that have been dreading the post. We have been those people laid in bed at night, worried sick, with just the absolute compression of debt on your shoulders is the most awful thing that you can ever experience. And unless you've been through it, you can't understand what that feels like. And we have people walking into our office, and I can see the debt on their face, on their shoulders. And we had a girl who was working with us, and she watched people come in and go and talk to Paul, and she said, it is amazing how they come in and they're on the floor, and they go in and knowledge is power. And once they realise, there is a way out of this.
Now, it's a business, you have to make a living out of it. How expensive is your Neo solution?
Well, our solution, I think, is good value. I don't think it's too expensive for people who we deal with, because the reality in this country is that most people have money. They just don't have enough money. And the reason for that is because they've got consumed by debt. So from our perspective, I think that we offer very good value for money in terms of our expertise. And the reality is that we have to see what people can afford, because that's a very important.
But are we talking about hundreds rather than thousands?
Yes, absolutely. And then depending, of course, on like what options are available to people. And at this moment in time, where we're at in this country, probably the only real solution at the moment is bankruptcy.
You are critical of the insolvency regime. You think that the minister has to step up to the plate. He promised reform if it wasn't working to the way, to the standards that he had set for it. That seems to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the press conference when it was announced, and when he launched the ISI and all that kind of stuff. And at that conference, he reiterated on several occasions, if it doesn't work, he'll have to change it. Now, it is a shambles at this moment in time. There is absolutely no doubt about it. We've had 3 personal insolvency arrangements. The ISI itself, and we deal with people in the ISI when we're at assignee meetings with bankrupt people, and the people in the ISI are fantastic. They're very, very good.
But they're working with a framework that was set down for them.
It's an absolute disaster, and it needs to be fixed. The bank veto is a disaster. The length of time that a personal insolvency arrangement can go on for is it's like a life sentence.
Yeah. So if you ever are lucky enough to get a windfall of any kind from a distant relative in Australia or winning the lotto, they'll take it all.
They take up to 50% of it. But it's a crazy situation. And so what people are left with now is they're left with the option, the only real option, if you can't work out a deal with your bank, which most people can't do, is go bankrupt.
And we've seen that the numbers of bankruptcies this year have soared. So people have clearly identified this as the more desirable option.
Well, there's been 66 bankruptcies in the state so far this year. There was a 6, I think, last year, and we've handled about 20 to 22 of those bankruptcies ourselves for the people. And I have to say, the people need to understand, when you walk out of the bankruptcy court that day, your debt is gone.
Yeah.
And this business has been extremely frustrating for us in terms of trying to get through the bureaucracy, because there's so many roadblocks, and particularly because I've been bankrupt. You would think that the ISI would want me they'd hold me up as somebody who say, this is the type of person we want and we want to encourage, because we need him to come back. But it's been the absolute opposite of that. And so we have had struggles with authority and stuff. And there was one evening we were out one Sunday night, and I was just so frustrated with what was going on. I said, I think we just give this up.
Yeah.
And then I went into an assignee meeting the next day with one of our bankrupt clients, and when we came out, this woman, heavily pregnant, came out, and she just turned to me, she threw her arms around me and she was crying. She said, Paul, I can't thank you so much, because this is over. I rang Jane immediately and said, forget about that conversation.
We're back in business. How do people contact you, Jane? Is there a website?
Yeah, there's a website. It's www.neofinancialsolutions.com. And the phone number's on there.
And we also, Pat, have we produced 2 guidelines. One is on the bankruptcy guide, and the other is on insolvency guide. And they're both free available for download on the website. And anybody in any difficulty is welcome to call us, give us a call. We'll talk to everybody on the phone, and if we can help them, we get them to come in to us. But we don't charge for a call or anything, and we're more than delighted.
Because you've been there, you've done that.
We know the
so
story.
There you go. All right, Paul and Jane Carroll of Neo Financial Solutions, thank you very much for joining us.